most revered and respected in the world. He will undertake the third and final stage in the sword-making process.
The polishing process was the job of a specialist, particularly in later centuries, and his task was to sharpen the sword, to give it its final shape, and also to reveal all the structures that were built into the sword during the forging and hardening process.
Every individual katana sword requires different kinds of special polishing stones. To select these, Master Honami draws on his encyclopedic knowledge of every swordsmith school in Japan. In the 14th century, there were 5 swordsmith schools. Incredibly, there are still 5 today. Good stones are rare and can cost thousands of dollars. Hour by hour, the polisher exposes the inner beauty of the metal. Now he turns his attention to the tip of the blade.
We say that making the tip is like applying makeup on your face, because the tip of the sword is what you show to the world.
The samurai's katana was not only a beautiful weapon, it was a symbol of power and position in Japan's complex social structure. A samurai actually wore 2 swords at all times as a visible sign of his untouchable authority, the katana and the shorter wakizashi.
Respect was demanded because they were the aristocrats. They were the rulers. They were the ones that the farmers grew rice for, the merchants traded goods for, the actors entertained and the priests prayed for. But they were also feared because, theoretically at least, they were the only members of the Japanese population who were allowed to bear arms.
The samurai and his katana were inseparable. Only death would part him from it. It was his soul.
During the 17th century, a book was published called Hagakure, which is the classic text of what it meant to be a samurai and how one was expected to behave. It contains the chilling phrase, "The way of the samurai is found in death." And in a sense, this sums up the whole of the samurai ethos. That the samurai's life was a preparation for death.
Samurai warriors took this code of conduct very seriously. They avoided failure, surrender, and dishonor above all else. Death was far preferable.
Samurai suicide, or seppuku, which is another reading of the popular term harakiri, is absolutely fundamental to understanding the samurai ethos.
The ultimate crime for a samurai was disobedience. He paid for his crime with his own hand. The code that had given him purpose would now end his life. If the samurai had served his master well, he could ask a loyal companion to assist him in his death by chopping his head off at the point of extreme pain. The Royal Armoury's collection in Leeds in the UK is home to almost every example of sword ever made. And it now plays host to an experiment that will pitch two iconic swords against each other. The curved samurai sword from Japan versus the straight European broadsword. The broadsword was an ideal cutting weapon, the katana ideal for slashing. So which one is best?
With the abandonment of the feudal system, testing swords on corpses was obviously out of the question. And as a result, substitutes to human bodies were found, and what we're doing today is testing it on bundles of straw.
Straw is a good approximation for the density of human bone. Our samurai contender goes first and easily slices through. And interestingly, the European broadsword, even with its blunter edge, does just as good a job. But European-style swords never caught on in a big way in Japan.
European swords that appeared in Japan had no effect because the Japanese certainly recognized that they weren't forged in the same way as Japanese blades, and quite frankly regarded them as inferior.
Similar cutting performance, but very different fighting techniques. The broadsword relies on brute strength, and the samurai on speed and fighting finesse. But by the 16th century, a new weapon appeared that challenged both sword and warrior, and would change the face of warfare forever. In Japan, guns fired by non-elite soldiers forced the samurai off the battlefield. But it wouldn't be the end of the way of the warrior. Long after the demise of the samurai class, the spirit of Bushido, the way of the warrior, survives in modern Japan. Sword schools flourish, and the secrets of the katana remain as alluring as ever. 80-year-old Otake Sensei is one of the world's finest martial arts experts and has attained the highest ranking grade in the art of samurai fighting. But before he passes on his 30 years of knowledge, all his pupils must swear an oath of blood never to reveal any of the secrets of the martial arts. More importantly, they swear always to conduct themselves in the true spirit of the samurai code. Otake Sensei teaches at the Katori Shinto Ryu, which was founded over 600 years ago. But before his pupils test out the science of the katana, they must first master the basics of one-to-one combat.
When you fight, you should never have the sun in your face. You should always keep the sun or the moon behind you. You can use it to blind your enemy. The best warrior is one who can turn circumstances to his advantage in a fight. Just here, the armor is weak, so it's a good target. Okay, take your position. You should attack here and here, at the arteries and at the heart. If you cut from the other side, you won't reach them. So attack here, or attack the neck. Of course, you can just step aside. But when you block the opponent, you should always use the back of the sword, because that's the hardest part. There are many marks on the blunt side of the sword. This is caused by constant use to block the opponent's blow. So you should use the back of the sword to attack, like this. Only if you practice again and again will your body remember. You have to be so good that you can think about going to work the next day and still be able to fight. But that takes a few years.
By day, Midori Tanaka is a receptionist for an electronics company. Her ancestors were samurai. By night, when her workday is finished, she boards a train with her sword. Midori's father, Fumon Tanaka, is a Grand Master Swordsman from Osaka who has devoted his whole life to studying and practicing the fighting arts of the samurai.
I think many Japanese people can still find the spirit of the samurai in their hearts. We have started to judge everything with money, or if you own a big house or drive a nice car. But the spirit of the warrior was different. Honor was more important. To give your best at all times was important. This is the spirit of Bushido that we should not forget.
Today, his house is a haven for those who would follow this code. Midori visits 3 times a week to train. For the last 1,000 years, usually only men were trained in these martial arts. Midori started training when she was a small child and hopes one day to replace her father as Grand Master.
I think that we live now in a society where women don't have to hide anymore. But I don't feel that I have a special role in this fighting school just because I'm a woman.
I want to pass on the knowledge that I received from my masters. And Midori is my only child. I was very happy when she decided to learn the old way of martial arts. If she hadn't gone this way, I'd have to choose somebody else to give my knowledge to.
Midori has advanced to the point where she now practices with a real sword, not a wooden one. This leaves no margin for error.
Through martial arts, you learn to overcome your fear. If you can reach the state of Mushin, which means no mind, you can be ready to fight at any time, even without fearing the possibility of death.
And who best to display this elusive mental state than the master himself? Tanaka prepares to show what the samurai meant by being at one with their swords and showing no fear. And why their lives depended on the quality of the blade. He will take the ultimate test when his daughter aims an arrow straight at his heart. Will his years of dedication and training protect him? Can his sword save him from a speeding arrow? Light, perfectly balanced, and hard enough to cut through armor. In the hands of a fully trained samurai, the katana is the ultimate weapon for close combat. But what made the samurai and his sword a formidable fighting unit was this ability to not fear death. Samurai were trained in the art of meditation to reach a state of mind known as Mushin. Fumon Tanaka now faces his daughter's arrow. In a contest against the bow and the sword, these lethal arrows can penetrate a board over 1 centimeter thick, more than enough to kill a man. It's not only Master Tanaka's ability to react in the face of a speeding arrow aimed at his heart, but also the sharpness of his sword that means he stands a chance of being able to sever it in mid-flight. The samurai's katana is proof of man's ability to strive for perfection. It is the culmination of generations of swordsmiths working across hundreds of years in a pursuit for the finest blade in the world. And these swords didn't go unnoticed when American troops occupied Japan during the Second World War. During the war, thousands of Japanese officers had a sword. Even kamikaze pilots died with them by their sides. So great was the demand for these warriors' weapons that the sword went into mass production. They were mostly poor quality imitations, not made in the traditional way, but merely drop forged from cheap steel. Although it's just possible that some true katana swords made it across enemy lines.
When the war ended, a large number of Japanese swords were surrendered or confiscated from Japanese prisoners or from the dead on battlefields. And just as the Japanese were very loath to part with them, so American GIs were very eager to acquire them. But among the hundreds of ordinary swords that were taken back to the States as souvenirs, there were a certain number of national treasures. Ones made, if you like, of imperial quality. And who knows how many of these treasures actually lie in American homes that were taken back without the owner knowing what a prized possession he'd acquired.
Over half a century later, the katana remains the finest sword ever made. It's an object of great beauty, a symbol of honor. Although these ancient values have modern-day price tags. The Tuken Shibata Gallery in Tokyo proudly displays its samurai swords. Perfection comes at a price, starting at around $5,000 to $25,000 for a good sword, and rising to over $50,000 for a famous one. Even if you can afford one, gallery owner Mr. Shibata doesn't sell to just anybody.
Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but the sword is still the soul of the samurai. I don't sell them to just anyone. It's important for me to get an understanding of the client, to feel like I can trust them.
It's now 3 months since Gasan Sadatoshi finished forging his sword. Master Honami, the polisher, is also done. It's the moment of truth. Time to inspect the results of half a year's work involving 15 men.
A sword that I spent so much time on, to see it finished, with all its characteristics brought fully to light, it leaves me speechless.
Made in the 21st century by strictly traditional methods, this katana sword is the embodiment of centuries of knowledge. In one perfect blade, it combines the resilient soft qualities of iron with a hard razor-sharp finish of steel. The polish both exquisite and lethal. For many, it's the hand weapon of choice.
To me, the Japanese sword is the most effective sword in the world.
In my opinion, the Japanese samurai sword is the finest sword ever made.
Even today, the samurai and his way of life continue to inspire new generations. 1,000 years of discipline, unswerving devotion, and peerless skill are values that Japan still holds high. And the legend of the katana sword lives on.